Welcome to a brand new episode of Starts at the Top, our podcast about leading differently. I'm Paul Thomas.
And I'm Zoe Amma. Our podcast exists to help leaders and their teams understand what they need to do differently today to prepare for the world of tomorrow. We started Starts at the Top as a podcast about digital disruption, but we soon realised that leaders were telling us about something more important and urgent, about how traditional ways of leading had changed forever.
We make it our mission to speak to leaders who are carving out new ways of leading, covering topics from emerging tech to inclusion, from remote work to mental health and resilience, and from climate change to AI. Lots of AI and more AI in this episode. If it's about the status of leadership in 2025, it will be on our podcast.
We're not here for the shiny corporate case studies. We share stories from leaders who have learned lessons and made progress the hard way. And our podcast is here to share ideas and inspire others. And today, on that very note, we're sharing our conversation with Katie Ghose, CEO at Kids, a national charity for disabled children, young people, and their families, and Helen Milner OBE, who is the Group CEO of Good Things Foundation, an international digital inclusion charity whose mission is a world where everyone can benefit from digital. Katie and Helen join us to talk about the Driving Digital Inclusion programme and the impact that digital exclusion is having on young people and other marginalised communities across the UK.
But before we get to our conversation with Katie and Helen, there are a couple of stories that we wanted to discuss. And I think this might be all framed quite nicely by the recent Channel 4 Dispatches episode, Will AI Take My Job?, which explored the potential of job losses due to AI. We'll share the details and the link to this. Hopefully, if you're not in the UK, you'll still be able to watch it, and a link to a recent article in The Guardian. But the programme highlighted that up to 8 million UK jobs might be at risk from AI or AI adoption, and featured an AI presenter, Aisha Gaban. See what they did there. Which also, although potentially very worrying for TV presenters and news readers everywhere, showcases AI technology's very real capabilities and raises concerns about its impact on human creativity and employment. Now, full disclosure, Zoe, I'm going to watch the episode right after this recording, but as I understand it, the show explores the benefits of AI for sure, but also presents a pretty grim outlook on the future of work and our environment.
Yeah, so this show was recommended to me by a couple of people on our team. Like you, I haven't actually seen it yet, but I've read some of the press coverage. And as we mentioned, we'll link to that in the show notes. It does sound pretty worrying, though. And the reason why it caught my eye is that I know that you and I have been having various conversations with some of the organisations that we know. There seems to be a lot of fear and uncertainty
Mhm.
around AI related job security and some quite existential questions about what do these technologies actually mean for my job and whether I can still offer something of value. So I think it's worth watching this program in that context to see what some of the trends might be about how jobs are going to be impacted, but also to start to think about how we can all plan for this future where we just don't know what the impact on jobs is going to be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I've had a couple of conversations just today. I've been in London today, and the conversation came up twice in both of those meetings about young people and entry level jobs, particularly in the professional services world that I work in, and just how difficult it's going to be for young people to get that foothold into the profession. Because, particularly in law, I think even more so than accountancy, those entry level jobs are being done quicker and more efficiently already by AI tools than they are by young people who want to learn the ropes. And I think that's a real challenge. Young people entering the accountancy world are being bypassed for roles because AI can take over and provide a quicker and more efficient route to getting some of those entry level jobs delivered.
It is a real worry, isn't it? I mean, this is something I do think about in the context of my children. And are they actually going to have jobs when they leave university or leave school, whenever they enter the workforce? Because there have been really significant cuts to graduate jobs, as we know. And we know that some of that is down to AI. We know that some of that is also down to the very significant overheads that employers are having to deal with in at the moment in the context of the cost of living crisis. And I think there are all these groups that could potentially fall through the cracks, because all of that knowledge that young people gain at the start of their careers, that is eventually something they will put to good use when they become the CEOs of tomorrow or the
Mm.
accountancy firm partners of tomorrow. So where's that pipeline of talent going to come from if there aren't enough jobs to bring that generation through? And then another story which caught our eye this week was, some people may have seen that the UK government recently launched its AI skills for the UK workforce. Now, this falls into a number of different parts. So, essentially, it's a report which talks about the AI skills gap, which is holding businesses back. There's some really interesting analysis of different sectors and how the skills gaps and also the opportunities and the skills needs are playing out within those different parts of the sector. And then, helpfully for a report, it also provides a bit of a solution in the sense of an AI skills framework. There's also an adoption pathway, and there's an employer checklist as well. Now, this is a chunky old document, so we haven't actually had time to read the full shebang yet, just to get our heads around some of the headlines instead. So, we are going to cover this in more detail in a later episode, but it's definitely something that is worth having a look at if you're an organization that is beginning to look at skilling up in the age of AI, that wants a bit of a steer on what sort of pillars you might need in a AI skills program. It's certainly something that is worth dipping into. And as I said, we will look at what some of the specifics and the sort of more granular detail is on it in a future program. One of the things we were talking about before we started recording is that the skills framework identifies three buckets of skills. So there's the technical skills pillar, which is, as you expect, to do with using the tools and having those technical skills with a capital T, in order to, how to use them, and the sort of what, when, and where side of things. I mean, it's quite interesting that that only forms one third of the skills framework, because the remaining two sections are, firstly, responsible and ethical AI skilling. And I thought that was really good that that is clearly such a central plank of this. And it really speaks to the need to do this in the right way and to think through all the different considerations around accuracy, quality of outputs, and adopting this in a way that is actually ethical. And then I think it's really great that the final pillar is all about what we would call some of the soft skills, but something there's been a bit of a resurgence of lately, because they are really, really critical to making this stuff happen. So, for example, things like deciding when you might use AI and preparing for training and assessing when to seek support as well, and providing feedback about use of AI. So it's very much about the kind of problem solving, the creativity, the context, and also kind of understanding the needs behind what you're actually trying to do,
Mm.
which I think are really mission critical. Because one of my things I always say to organizations about skilling is, you cannot drop skills as a commoditized product into an organization. That doesn't really work unless you're talking about some tiny tweak or some very, very transactional aspect of skills. And AI skills are not like that. What really jumps out at me from the framework, from the report, from what I've seen so far, is that we are really looking at a wholesale change to ways of working, roles, and responsibilities. So that is the big headline on this for me. And I would strongly recommend that anyone who's committed to skilling up in this space, or even just thinking about it, has a look at this report. There's lots of really interesting stuff in there.
Which should be anyone, really, shouldn't
Yeah,
it? I
yeah,
mean,
it should be anyone.
it
And
should
if you're
be
not,
anyone.
ask yourself why you are not
Why you're not,
looking at
and
skilling up.
I think there's some really interesting stuff in here. As we said, we'll come back to it in a couple of weeks' time. Once we've had the chance to absorb it. It only came out a few days ago. But one thing I thought is I think this is helpful because hopefully it provides a bit of a leveler across industries as
Mm,
well. Because everyone's trying to do their own thing, everyone's moving at a different pace. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different organisations. We've just talked about the sort of the existential dread within professional services, for example, and how that's starting to encroach. So perhaps this levels the playing field a little bit and gives us all a framework to sort of lean on, because I think everyone's trying to somewhat reinvent the wheel, and this just brings a little bit of leveling to a degree.
exactly. Exactly. And actually, in some ways, it's quite reassuring reading about the skills gaps across different industries, even the digital
Yeah.
and technology sector. And that's really interesting because my interpretation of that from a very quick look at it earlier is that actually it's saying that some of the non technical skills and the responsible and ethical skills are a really key area, and that would balance out the high prevalence of technical skills you would likely get in the digital and tech space, unsurprisingly. So I
Mm.
think it's really interesting and also quite reassuring in many ways that all of these sectors have skills gaps, and we all need to look at how we can close them.
Yeah. And it just goes to show that one of my final conversations, work conversations today, was with another AI strategist who basically said he was having to get used to sitting in front of clients and not having any of the answers, but being comfortable that they didn't have any of the answers, and we would work together with our clients to try and explore those answers together. And I think that's sort of giving up that idea that you have any kind of power in the conversation. Yes, we can guide you through some of the questions you should ask, and perhaps now with some of these frameworks coming through, there's something that we can all work towards and work together on.
Totally. I mean, you've just described my career in a nutshell there, Paul.
Yes, yes. Well, we'll try to have more of an expert view on it for our listeners in a couple of weeks' time. But now for our interview with Katie Ghose and Helen Milner.
We are very excited to welcome two amazing leaders to Starts at the Top today, Helen Milner and Katie Gose. So we're very pleased to have them both with us today to talk about a great example of digital inclusion and collaboration. If you haven't come across Helen or Katie before, I highly recommend that you start following them. Just to begin the interview by saying a little bit about who they are, what they do, and we will be hearing more about this over the interview itself. Helen Milner OBE is the Group Chief Executive of Good Things Foundation, an international digital inclusion charity whose mission is a world where everyone can benefit from digital. Good Things Foundation Group operates in the UK and Australia, working with thousands of hyperlocal community partners so that people can benefit from everything the internet and digital technologies have to offer. And that is very much on message with what our podcast is about. We're also delighted to welcome Katie to the podcast today. Katie has been CEO of Kids since 2019, and I've known her for some years, and she is a delight to work with. She's a non-profit CEO and experienced board member with nearly 3 decades experience of leadership and management in the UK voluntary sector, and was recently appointed co-chair of Womankind Worldwide, an international development and human rights organisation. And very pertinently to today, because we'll be talking about this, she is founder and co-chair of the Digital Services Consortium, an alliance of 12 disabled children's charities collaborating on the design and delivery of digital services. Helen and Katie, welcome to Starts at the Top. We are so excited to have you both here, not least because we've all just battled through some tech issues. So just raising the curtain there to some behind the scenes tech challenges that we've all faced, but we've got through it. So thank you.
Great to be with you today.
Very
Lov
happy to have you both here. Thank
Lovely
you.
to be here. Thanks,
Thank
Zoe.
you. Thank you so much for coming along. So, I mentioned there that we were going to be talking about the Digital Services Consortium and the partners who are involved. Katie, perhaps if we kick off with you, because I remember we first talked about this some years ago, didn't we? Can you tell our listeners a bit about what it is and who's involved?
Yes, so the Digital Services Consortium is an alliance of 12 charities working with disabled or seriously ill children and their families in the UK, providing them with a wide range of services. And our shared passion is how to create quality services and experiences online for the disabled children and families we support, and how to support them with the digital confidence and the skills and the devices and the data to be able to access public services or any service online. And we've been going since November 2020. It was 6 months into the COVID pandemic that Richard, who was then Chief Exec of Sense, and myself just shared a thought. Should we talk to other service deliverers? We were all had been adapting. We'd been going virtual. And out of that spark, out of that initial conversation came an incredible collaboration. And one of the best bits has been coming alongside with Good Things Foundation, AbilityNet and CAST. And we're now part of a really exciting program of very practical delivery. And I know we're going to be exploring that a little bit more today as well.
And that's so exciting because it's brilliant to hear about a collaboration that was forged in the fire of lockdown and has gone from strength to strength. So, one of the reasons how this conversation came about today was the Driving Digital Inclusion program. So, Helen, could you tell us a bit more about that and what you're aiming to achieve together?
Absolutely, and, it's incredible to think how long ago the pandemic was really, but for all of us working in digital inclusion, it was a massive and significant moment. Um, so obviously, Good Things Foundation, we're a digital inclusion charity, and before the pandemic, we were focused on helping adults to get the skills that they needed to be able to participate in a digital society. Um, that we occasionally dallied here and there in little pilots around helping people get access to a laptop or some connectivity, but we very much felt that that was the domain of other organizations. Um, and then once the pandemic struck and lockdown happened, and of course the lockdown was the piece of the jigsaw that made it so obvious that so many people, so many of the people that we were helping through the National Digital Inclusion Network, through the network of thousands of local places, were so dependent on those places to get the access to the internet. So actually, we were aware that getting people the technology that they needed was so important to be able for them to have some kind of equality. I would say that I personally perhaps had ignored that having access to the internet through a community organization, through a library, through a third party was somehow not as good as having it personally. And so the pandemic showed that everybody needed it personally, and everybody needed it at least at a household level. Um, and that's really where the partnership with Katie and Richard and others in the consortium came from, because they were thinking very similar things to say, well, we can develop our services online, but actually, what happens to those children and families who can't afford it, who can't afford access to the internet, don't really know how to get connectivity, or they can get connectivity through a project for a very short period of time, and then what happens next for them for that connectivity? And so that we were bringing that expertise of digital exclusion, of digital inclusion, of very quickly and rapidly mobilizing, getting devices and connectivity to people who were digitally excluded. And Katie and the others in the consortium supporting children with disabilities were very much saying, well, how have you managed to do that? How can you do that? How can we do it within the consortium to help children? And so that's really where this program and this project has that's how it started. And now, thankfully, it's taken a while, but we've actually now got it, and it's up and running.
And that's brilliant and so timely because, firstly, that takes me back to lockdown and how everyone was talking about digital inclusion. And it feels like in 2025, it started to rise up the agenda again, which I'm really pleased to see because, like both of you, it's such a key issue of equity and how society moves forward. So perhaps could one of you tell us, why is digital inclusion rising up the agenda again this year? And what are you aiming to achieve through the digital inclusion program to help take that progress to the next level?
Well, why don't I answer the first part and then Katie answer the second part of that question? I think that would be best. I mean, I think that last year we had a new government. You know, we had a change of government, and actually, we now have a government who cares about digital inclusion. That they within the Department for Science, Innovation, and Technology, they had 1.5 people or half a person working on digital inclusion. They now have 40. There's a brand new digital inclusion and skills unit within the Department for Science, Innovation, and Technology. So that and once it's on the political agenda, which is fantastic, it's then also on lots of other people's agenda as well. And so businesses obviously have taken note that the government cares about digital inclusion and therefore they care a little bit more about digital inclusion. And it's not just in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology that digital inclusion is important. Digital inclusion is seen as being important across different departments as well. So obviously the Labour government came in with mission-led thinking with their missions, um, and that a number of ministers, a number of the people around the cabinet table, no less, understand that digital inclusion is going to help them to amplify and to deliver on those missions. So I think that the trigger for that interest has been that new political interest by the new Labour government. Um, and then others, for all sorts of reasons, have then said, yes, this is important, and let's get together and let's do more work on it. And then, of course, there's the project, Katie.
Yes, which is incredibly exciting. And I guess there are particular barriers that disabled or seriously ill children share with us. Perhaps if you're not verbal and you have certain needs from technology, or you need sensory adaptations, or you have certain physical disabilities which are going to affect how you use technology to its best. And the program is going to enrich our learning about how do we support those people and families. It's beautifully simple in its design. First, we're going to supply children and family members with devices, data and training, working closely with Good Things Foundation and Ability Net. Second, one of our 12 charities is going to provide an opportunity to use that kit and knowledge to experience one of our online services, everything from a peer support group to an online wellbeing program for teenagers to a community service for children with acquired brain injury. And that's just 3 out of the 12 offerings we're putting together. And then third, and throughout, children and family members are going to provide their honest feedback. What worked and what didn't quite work for them. And we want to embrace that and use that to inform all of us. So we accelerate our learning. It's learning for the disabled children sector and for our digital inclusion experts. And we need it to be learning for government technology companies. We want to accelerate our learning because we can see the divide that's there. And that's the passion and the practicality that the program's going to develop and deliver.
That's so exciting. I love that feedback loop you've got built into the program. And coming back to people who are at the sharp end of digital exclusion and thinking about what it is like for them day to day, what impact are you seeing on young people in marginalised communities? Are there any examples that you can share?
Yes, perhaps I'll start on that, Helen. I'm sure you'll have examples as well. Just to give a very practical example, if you're a young person with a serious health condition and you spend a lot of your time in hospital and you haven't had that opportunity, that the devices and the data isn't there, your parents might be worrying about your online safety and they haven't had that opportunity to develop skills and confidence. If you're not able to be safely online and enjoying activities and connection and your parents aren't able to do that as well, then when you do come out of hospital, you could feel more isolated instead of feeling connected as part of a community. So we're awash really with practical examples of this, and the online world is becoming more important and it's accelerating all the time. And we all keep thinking about how it interacts with other parts of our lives as well. And the risk is that disabled or seriously ill children are left out or left behind. And that's what we're really seeking to address.
Oh, and I think it's really interesting that often when people think about digital exclusion, they think about people being excluded from from services, like not being able to get a GP appointment. It feels very transactional. But actually, when you talk to people who are digitally excluded and that you really understand how it's helping them in a holistic way across their lives, it is so fascinating. Um, one boy told me that when we'd help their family, um, that he felt the same as the other kids at school, right? So he didn't just talk about being able to do his homework or being able to, to send in his essay or, the mum talking about doing a bit of online shopping. It wasn't the transactional things that was the most important to him. It was that he now felt the same. He didn't use the word equality, but he said, I'm now like the other boys in my class, right? And then another young man I spoke to, he was had recently moved out of home. He was like in his early 20s. He was unemployed looking for work and he'd moved to a local town to have more options for finding a job, and he had no connectivity, and we helped him with free connectivity. And he said, um, when you're poor and unemployed, you don't have any money, so you can't do anything. You can't meet your friends for a drink. You can't go out because you have no money. He said you spend your whole day either applying for work or watching daytime TV. And he said, "What's happened now is I no longer feel lonely." And he said he said it was funny. He said, "I speak to my mum every day. I'm not sure she likes that, but I do talk to her every day." And he's like, "What's that video called?" He said, She might think I'm a bit of a nuisance." But he was telling me about how much happier he felt, how more connected he felt to society. So it wasn't just he was more hopeful that he would get a job because he actually had the wherewithal to be able to do it at any time of the day personally in his own space, but actually now he felt connected and happy. And I just think that sometimes when we talk about digital exclusion, we focus too much on the transactional and not on those really deep, meaningful things that connection and communication bring. And those people who are excluded are doubly excluded from all of those things that we all enjoy and take for granted, I think, for those of us who are digitally included every day.
I love that, and for us, all of the charities involved, a lot of what we do is about fun and friendship and nurturing those connections, as you say, Helen. And we want the program to be able to just support people to do the kind of things, the fun things that they want to be able to do.
I think there's groups of people that aren't often asked for their input into how services are designed or the way that things are. So that value is twofold, isn't it, for them? That not only do they feel included, but they then feel included in a conversation that they've just not been able to be part of at all.
I think that's right. I would say, though, l- I am an optimist and I do definitely often have rose colored glasses on. But sometimes, that I hear about things that are probably not gonna change for a long time. I know the NHS is working terribly hard and I love the NHS, but most people's interaction online with the NHS is not simple. Like, there's multiple apps, there's multiple things that they need to do. The level of literacy that they need is normally quite high, that there still seems to be, like, a time frame that you need to do it in the day to be able to engage with it. And so I think that, you're absolutely right that having real people's voices, so people who find interacting with services difficult and have their feedback is really important. I think I also don't want to give anybody the impression that sometimes there'll be a quick fix, right? So actually asking for feedback and asking for input and asking for ideas is absolutely essential, but sometimes we can't fix some of these things particularly quickly. That we can provide that connection, we can provide people who just can't afford it the wherewithal, the devices, the connectivity, and the skills to be able to do it and to be able to use that technology in a way that is really going to benefit them in their lives. But actually, there's lots of other things that are broken, and we can't fix all of those things necessarily that quickly.
And for charity leaders listening to this, where Helen and Katie have got them thinking, I need to be doing more about digital inclusion now. I've really realised now how important this is again post lockdown. What would you advise them? What should they be doing and planning for?
Shall I jump in terms of disability children's sector, Helen, and then hear
Yeah.
from you on other aspects? I feel strongly about skills. I think we all need to be stepping up, strengthening our own skills, our own organisation skills and the wider sector skills, and with that the confidence as well, because all of us work with brilliant colleagues on the front line who are working alongside in services, disabled children and young people. Quite understandably, they'll have different amounts of skills and confidence when it comes to doing stuff virtually. So how can we accelerate all of our learning and confidence? And I think that is something for all of us to do as leaders.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think that, where you started, Zoe, is that it's a lot of this is about collaboration, that there will be, other charities within their sectors that have already started on the journey. Obviously, at Good Things Foundation, we now work with 7,000 organisations, in the grassroots, in communities. Good Things Foundation, everything that we provide for those partners at the local level is all free. So we can provide free connectivity, free devices when we get them through the device bank, and also access to free content and free training. I think the other thing, because this is talking to leaders, is that sometimes the free stuff kind of helps you get started, but I think it's also about thinking, how does it affect you strategically? So who within your audience is digitally excluded? And it could be that 50% of them are digitally excluded. It could be that 80% are. It could be that 5% are. So how are you thinking about them and how are you including them into your digital services? And one example that springs to mind is actually not a charity, but we're working now with 70 hospital trusts maternity units, um, and some of them have joined the National Digital Inclusion Network. So about 50 of them have, about 30 of them are actively giving out SIMs through the offer that we have at Good Things called the National Data Bank. But then others, where the trusts can't join the network, they know about the network and they're referring people to local digital inclusion hubs and data banks in their local areas. And that it's not just about providing the SIMs. So they're providing the SIMs. But what happened for them was that they realized that there were so many apps and offers and indeed even the red book that you get when you're pregnant now is going to be digitized. The mums to be who are digitally excluded was significantly disadvantaged, and they made that strategic leap, and then leaders within the field, in fact a role model in one of the maternity units, actually then started talking about the way in which she was helping digitally excluded women, with the sims, and that they're now actually thinking differently about women, for example, who aren't returning phone calls or returning messages, because they're saying previously it was always because that was their choice that they hadn't done that. They had ignored that. But now they're realizing that sometimes it's not their choice. It's actually because they're digitally excluded. So it's shifted the way that they're thinking about the women that they're supporting, because they're actually understanding how digital exclusion is literally excluding them from being able to do something like pick up the phone or to answer a message that they're sending to them. And so I think that trying to understand it from a strategic point of view, who's your audience? How are you helping those people? How much of that is digitized? How much of it will become more digitized? And as you digitize your services further, who will you be leaving behind within your audience? And then hopefully, working with people like Katie and the consortium that she and Richard has set up, working with Good Things Foundation, working with others within the sector. There's lots of ability in there is a fantastic partner. Working with others within the sector to say, I want to get started on this journey. Can you help me? And the answer will almost always be yes.
And I love that framing because you're really looking at digital inclusion and exclusion there as how we view this and we plan for this alongside our wider digital development. And I suppose also how AI as well is changing our audience and society as well. So I love that as it being a real cornerstone of how you deliver your mission. So Katie, that takes us to you really nicely, actually. So Helen was obviously talking about collaboration between all these amazing organizations together. I think we all know working in the sector that collaboration is something we all talk about, but it's sometimes a little more challenging to do in practice. And you've got such a great example of it here. Can you tell us about how all of these organizations are working together so successfully to have got to this point? What is the secret of your success here?
Co-leadership has been key. So Richard and I worked hand in glove, and now I'm working hand in glove with Rachel and with James at Centre, with all the leaders in the consortium. It just means you pass the baton continually and you keep the momentum going when you're wondering if you are going to get the money. So you do the agenda, you nudge that funder, I'll do a draft of the presentation for the government cross-departmental group. Whatever it is, we do a lot of sharing of the load. And honestly, I think that's why we've been able to keep the momentum going. Helen, you were fantastically generous with your time and support for our vision and all the help you gave us with funders. And in the end, between us, we secured £2.4 million, National Lottery Community Fund Children in Need, who showed real leadership, Vodafone Virgin Media O2, working with Good Things Foundation, in-kind support, each and every funder and donor really valuable. And that's been something about the collaboration, that people have been generous and saying, well, my organisation isn't going to get loads of money, but there's a bigger piece here. We'll get a little bit to do our thing, and my fundraising officer can help with this bit if you can help with the other bit. So that's been really key as well. And the other thing is we had a simple vision and a plan. I was convinced, our 3-phase approach for the programme, I was just so convinced of that with others. And Helen, I think you believed in it, and we were inspired by the Digital Lifeline programs. I think that's the other thing about collaboration, is learning from those blueprints. That was adults with learning disabilities and devices, and we took the germ of that, but we need something like that for children. So there's lots of great examples out there. At kids, we're about to launch a National Transitions Alliance for disabled children going into adulthood. And we've learned from the Digital Services Consortium. It's given us a little bit of a blueprint and a template. And I think the final thing I'd say is just you get to a certain point where you've almost given quite a lot of free time, and then you do need to professionalise and formalise a bit. So I think it's about recognising when you need to do that, and particularly when you're getting funding as well. We've had to formalise some things amongst our 12 charities and our partners, because that's the right thing to do once you're formally in delivery mode together.
I really love that, because what you've described there is that way of working. So you're really operating as a successful network rather than a group of organizations. And it takes a bit of a different mindset to do that, doesn't it?
I think it does. And look, people have been so generous with their time and their goodwill. We basically lived off goodwill for quite a long time. Well, we just thought and said to ourselves, this is a when, not an if. But we had to keep on, and we were really supported by other people being so convinced this was the right thing to do and a good thing to do. So the goodwill and the generosity, and as you say, it is a little bit of a different mindset, and thinking it's not all about my organisation at all. It's about being more than the sum of our parts. So I think it involves a little bit of a different way of thinking, and a generous way of thinking.
What else do you need from outside of the sector in terms of collaboration and help and assistance?
Um, just jumping in from Good Things is, I think that it sort of builds on Katie's answer already, is that it's also about playing to your strengths. So that clearly in the consortium, our strength was that we understood about how to get the devices and the connectivity, and we had reached to funders that Katie and Richard didn't have reach to. So we brought that to the party, and that so within the consortium, Vodafone 3 and Virgin Media O2 are bringing free connectivity because that's what they've got. So that's what they're bringing.
Mm.
So I think it's often about understanding what others have, so others from outside the sector have, and then how that can support and help you with to deliver your strategy. Um, And so very much, I mean, as always with partnership is understanding first, the understanding what they have and what they need and what you have and what you need. And so really building that partnership. And I think that's true within the sector as well as with people from outside of the sector as well.
That's brilliant. And hopefully that will get some more people coming to you because we've got a cross sector listenership as you know. So that's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Because it's such a great example of how a collaboration has gained momentum, has got funding, and is starting to move forward and is doing further ambitious things. Where would you like to be in 5 years' time? So, if we could get in a time machine now and come out in 5 years' time, where would you like to be? What would you have achieved?
I want us to have delivered to at least 20,000 children and young people and family members through this programme and beyond to an ambitious next phase of delivery. And one of the things I want to come out of this is reflecting the fact it's still fairly unusual for charities to be collaborating on service delivery. It's much more common to be collaborating on a policy or a campaign. And so taking this great groundwork that we've done and saying we've come together as service delivery because that's what we want to do and we want to do it well digitally. So I would love us to be in the field of information and advice provision, giving an even better service and a joined up service for disabled or seriously ill children, young people and their families to give them even better benefits and value. And one of the things we've discovered is that we have such a broad coalition of people who are working with children with very specific, maybe one specific disability or health condition, or like kids, we support all kinds of kids with all kinds of disabilities. But of course, there could be huge benefit in bringing some of those young people together, or the parents and families might want the peer support from a much broader range of people as well. So that's, for me, as well as all the digital inclusion, I think this is a real gift to the sector in terms of how to collaborate on services at a time when people are in desperate need of practical and emotional support.
That's really
Yeah.
exciting. And those aspirations around information and advice, I mean, that whole field is going to so different, isn't it? Because of AI in 5 years' time and probably before as well. So really excited to see that come to life. How about you, Helen? What's your vision for success here?
Well, I mean, there's 10 million people and families who are digitally excluded in the UK today. So clearly, my vision is always that that should be zero. Um, that I think that within the charity sector, I think there's a lot more to be done. Understanding exactly in the way that Katie and the rest of the consortium have about how digital inclusion is relevant to the delivery of your services. I think quite often it's still seen as a bolt on, so it needs to be baked in. So really understanding the needs of service users and to understand that they may well be digitally excluded. And that may be just skills or just a device or just connectivity. It doesn't have to be all of the things all the time. And digital exclusion isn't binary, that you could be included today but excluded tomorrow for lots of reasons. I think within the sector, understanding that embedding digital inclusion into your strategy and into what you do is going to make you be able to achieve more. And you mentioned AI a few times, Zoe. I think that includes AI as well, right? That within the private sector, a lot of businesses have stepped up over the last 5 years, post-pandemic, during the pandemic and post-pandemic, and have really taken on board digital inclusion. But there's so many more businesses that can help. And on a very practical and small level, um, we take old tech from businesses and completely free of charge, and we refurbish those that can be refurbished and get them out into the hands of digitally excluded people. So that's something really practical that any of your business leaders who are listening could help us with. But I think being part of the sector and part of the journey and understanding that there is a business case for them as well, that this is their customers, their current customers, their future customers is really important. And from a government point of view, digital inclusion needs to continue to be baked in right across all government areas. There's new job centres and guidance centres are coming out. They should all be having digital inclusion embedded into them. Obviously, the government is having a massive investment in digitising public services, using AI for public services. All of that needs to embed digital inclusion into that as well. So I think that there's lots of green shoots here. There's lots of positive opportunities, so I think they need to be grasped. And really, 5 years' time will be a good point to look back to see if those green shoots actually did grow into really impactful and important steps for digitally excluded people, or whether they just were small little projects that came and went and helped a few thousand people, not the millions of people that need that help.
Thank
You've
you,
certainly
Helen.
given me some homework because I'm a trustee for a community trust locally here, and we help people through giving energy vouchers and food vouchers. Do you know what? I don't know that I've ever asked the question about digital access and whether that's something that we should also be thinking about as well.
Mhm.
And I know talked at the beginning about we're recording this at the beginning of September. There's just been a government reshuffle, and I think I might have impacted. I was meant to be having a meeting with my local MP on Friday, and just as we were trying to get on the call, he emailed in to cancel. But I will be having that conversation with him as well about how we can help at a local level to make sure that food, energy, and probably connectivity vouchers as well, if we can
Yeah,
get our
and,
hands on them.
you are probably eligible to join the National Digital Inclusion Network, and that means you could become a local data bank, and that means you could give SIMs for people who need,
Yeah.
food vouchers and energy vouchers, so that's a really simple way forward. I think the reshuffle's really interesting, Paul, because, I mean, Peter Kyle's been a great advocate for digital inclusion as a Secretary of State at, Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. He's now moved to business, but Liz Kendall has come from Department for Work and Pensions. So actually, she will have an understanding of those people who are um, digitally excluded because they are out of work, they're on universal credit, or they may well also be disabled because obviously disability sits within DWP. So she's going to have an understanding of those beneficiaries that hopefully she'll then be bringing with her new tech hat, her new tech role at Science, Innovation, and Technology, and hopefully that means that she'll be just as passionate about digital inclusion as Peter Kyle has been. So um, that every reshuffle might have a silver lining. We have to wait and see because, as you're saying, we're in September now where the reshuffles just happened. So I'm sure within the next month or so we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see that. Amazing. So, where can people go to find out more about the work that you're both doing?
For Good Things Foundation, just come to the Good Things Foundation website. So that's goodthingsfoundation.org. And that if you want to become a data bank or join the National Digital Inclusion Network, hopefully it's quite easy to find that out on the website. So just follow the menu, and you should find that out. And there's lots of contact details on the website as well.
And yeah, for the Digital Services Consortium, so any of our 12 member charities can provide information. So kids.org.uk or sense.org.uk, or follow me on LinkedIn. I did a post earlier in the year when we launched the programme as well, sort of bringing it to life. And we'd love to hear from any of you, private, public, voluntary sectors. This has to be a collaboration, and we'd love to be involved with you as we take it forward.
Amazing. Thank you, Katie. This has to be a collaboration in every sense. What a great note to end on. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on and sharing this brilliant example of how civil society needs to come together and tackle one of the great social justice issues of our time, and also telling us how you're doing it as well. And we're really excited to see where you go next with this. So please do keep us in the loop, and hopefully you'll both come back again before 5 years to tell us how it's gone.
Fantastic. That'd be great. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you both.
Many thanks to Katie and Helen for joining us on the podcast. It was so great to hear about the programme of change that they're putting into place, and what a double act.
And an update I mentioned in there that in the interview that I would be looking to help my charity explore its role as a potential data bank in the local community, and we are starting to explore it as a charity. So thank you to Katie and Helen for that little bit of inspiration. As always, we really do appreciate that you've listened all the way to the end of the episode, so thank you very much. You can support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us. It really does help us to reach more people, so if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please do share us with a friend.
Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.